Hello everyone, Benji-Sales here, and I'm here today to talk to you about an interview that just went live today with Phil Spencer with Kinda Funny Games on the Xcast. Now, I first of all, right off the top, want to say that this is an excellent interview. It's an incredible interview. It's an absolute must-watch in my opinion, and this video is only going to be addressing one very small part of this interview that actually takes place at the very end of the interview. So I highly encourage you to go watch this because honestly, this was a great look for the Kinda Funny Xcast crew themselves. They asked Phil very tough questions. They don't back down from it. And it's also, in my opinion, mostly up until one part where we have some disagreement, a very good look for Phil Spencer as well. He is brutally honest. He has a ton of candor, and I really, really respect both Kinda Funny and Phil Spencer for doing this interview. Now, I also want to say off the top that while this is a response to Phil Spencer, I very, very much respect Phil Spencer. This video is not in any way meant to be an attack on Phil Spencer. I am very, a little upset with how rude people are being online towards Phil Spencer. I can disagree with some of the statements that Phil Spencer makes in this interview and still respect him a whole ton. And keep in mind, of course, you guys could disagree with me as well and think Phil is correct here and I'm wrong. But to get to the meat and potatoes, Benji, why are you making this video? You're saying that you have a disagreement with Phil. What do you want to talk about? Well, it specifically has to do with the very end of this interview. It takes place, the interview itself is around 40 minutes. This is past the 30-minute mark. This is like right at the tail end of the video. And during it, Phil Spencer starts talking about hardware sales. He gets asked if Microsoft has kind of lost sight of console, if they're so focused on their other things, is that impacting the console? And he has some responses here that I personally believe do not hold up to closer scrutiny. There's a lot here that I disagree with, if I'm going to be honest with you. And again, this will all be handled very, very respectively. I greatly admire Phil. I think he does a ton of amazing work, but I disagreed with some of the statements that Phil makes so strongly as a sales guy. I had to respond. I couldn't let this one go, and I've never made a response video like this before. So again, hopefully it's all handled well. This is not meant as an attack, but let me walk you through some of the statements that Phil makes, and I'm going to address direct quotes piece by piece here, okay, guys? So we're going to these are direct quotes from Phil. It's not going to be me putting words in his mouth. I'm going to be trying to interpret them as well as I can, but we're going to dive into this now. So first of all, let's go to the very first quote here in this segment that I'm talking about. And Phil says, I will say, this might be disruptive as well. We do have a different vision. We want Xbox to be something that people who buy our console can feel like they're a member of, who are playing on PC, who are playing on cloud. They feel like they are full members of our ecosystem. So this actual first quote, zero issues with it. In fact, I think it's great. It's pretty much the same thing Microsoft's been saying this entire generation. They really started going down this path towards the end of the Xbox One cycle, where they started talking about cloud. They started, releasing games on PC day one. They introduced Game Pass, all of these sort of things evolving beyond just the console. This is perfectly fine. This quote, 100% okay. In fact, I'm in complete agreement with Phil. I think everything here is spot on. No complaints. Great. Okay, great. So you're like, Benji, things are starting off very positive. Well, things start to go off the rails, in my opinion, as soon as we hit the second quote. So as soon as we go into part two, that's where I start finding some issues with some of the claims and some of the statements that Phil is making here. So this next quote, we're not in the business of out-consoling Sony or Nintendo. Again, I'm pretty okay with that, if I'm going to be honest with you. We're going to go into it, but I kind of get what he's saying. He's saying, hey, Xbox isn't designed as just a console. Like, our mission, our end goal is not to necessarily sell more Xbox consoles than PlayStation and Nintendo. again, we're on the same page. I'm like, okay, Phil, that's you're on a roll, man. You're completely fine. But here's where things start to get a little shifty. There isn't really a great solution or win for us. And I know that will upset a ton of people, but it's just the truth of the matter is that when you're in third place in the console marketplace and the top two players are as strong as they are, we are not in a position. So here you start to see the beginnings of what I'm going to call, and I have to be very careful with my wording here because, again, I respect Phil a ton. Maybe there's an incredibly slim chance that Phil's going to watch this video. Not likely, but you never know, right? So I have to be very, very careful with my wording here. But this is where you start to see in the beginnings of what I feel is a little bit of a defeatist attitude that happens in this sales segment. Now, Phil in this interview, I can clearly see, and I think everyone can see watching it, is under quite a bit of stress. I don't think I've ever seen Phil Spencer like this before, honestly, in public. Now, to me, that just shows how great it is that he even agreed to do this interview. You have to remember that right now there's a lot happening at once with Xbox, right? You're seeing the CMA decision come down, which is causing, I'm sure, tons of headaches. You had the Redfall reviews, which obviously are much lower than anyone would have wanted. You have all of this piling on at once, and now all of a sudden Phil is thrust into this public position. And I honestly wonder if some of the statements that we're going to go into here, if Phil himself actually fully believes what he's saying, or if some of this is a bit of reactionary. And I don't mean reactionary in that he's lashing out. I just mean I wonder if he's under a ton of stress and it's impacting some of the things he says. Now, let me go into why. It immediately pivots to like a console war race, right? That's the immediate pivot here with him. So we start off with an ecosystem discussion, which I'm very much in favor of. And then we immediately go to, like, straight from that, it's instantly not about how, we're going to have a very healthy cycle. We think that Xbox Series can still outsell Xbox One. We're hoping that we can maybe get back to like 360 levels of sales. We're going to work very, very hard to get you there. None of that happens. We go immediately from ecosystem to instantly this kind of we cannot compete wording that you've seen them use with like CMA and stuff, right? So he's talking instantly about how there's no solution for us. We're in third place in the console market. The top two players are too strong. You see what I'm saying? It's instant. It's an instant pivot from, we're not trying to out-console Sony and Nintendo. It's not that, we're not trying to out-console them, but we're trying to just, really have a super healthy cycle. It's straight to, we just can't compete. We can't compete. These top two are too strong. We're in third place. There's no answers for us. And keep in mind, I'm not saying that that Phil himself does not believe that they can outsell Xbox One or they can have, a generation as successful as 360 with the console. I'm not saying he doesn't believe that. I'm going off direct quotes and how he's phrasing them, okay? So this is where I kind of start to run into some of my first issues with this segment of the interview. I think that we could have pivoted from, the ecosystem, that's really what we're all about, but we're also fully committed to console. We want to make this thing the best-selling Xbox ever, and we're going to work very, very hard to get you there. He doesn't go there. Now, at the very end of this sales segment, he does still talk about how they're invested in the console and they want it to do well. But that comes after a whole barrage of quotes that we're going to get into that are really painting the console in a very negative light, if I'm being honest with you. This isn't a great tactic in terms of marketing, I don't believe, that he does here. And I think that's an honesty moment, right? I think you're seeing through what would normally be a PR response, and you're seeing the person behind Phil Spencer, because I'm just going to be frank, as a guy who, likes to try to watch this stuff for marketing and stuff, I feel like what happens in these next couple quotes is pretty terrible, actually, for Xbox marketing. Now, the next quote we're going to go into here is, I see it out there. I see commentary, if you just build great games, everything would turn around. It's just not true that if we go off and build great games, all of a sudden, you're going to see console share shift in a dramatic way. We lost the worst generation to lose in the Xbox One generation, where everybody built their digital library of games. You're seeing this defeatist attitude continue to come through here in a very strong light, right? You're seeing him talk about how we lost the worst generation. Everybody built their digital library of games. Like, Phil's really building up a viewpoint here that they have an insurmountable task in front of them, that they just can't do it, right? They lost the gen that they really needed to win. Everyone built up their library. You know, even if we build you amazing games, it's not going to turn things around. And I have a very, very strong piece of evidence here that can completely invalidate everything that Phil says, okay? So everything that the case that Phil's building here in front of you is that the digital, right? He's really attaching himself to digital, and that it was all about digital games. And now, you know, everyone bought their digital games on PlayStation, and they'll never leave PlayStation, and you know, they're just kind of screwed, right? And he's basically talking about how since they lost the Xbox One generation, that hurt them so badly. You know, how are we going to recover from such a bad generation? Well, I have a strong example for him that literally just happened. This is not a situation that happened 20 years ago. This is not a situation that happened in the past. This is not a situation that no one else in the industry can look at for inspiration. In fact, it is very recent. It is as recent as 2017. And to put that into more context on how recent 2017 is, that is only 3 years before the Xbox Series consoles just launched. So we are talking what essentially is the current status quo, right? And I think by now you probably all know what I'm referencing, and that is the rise of the Nintendo Switch. Now let's look at the Nintendo Switch and what Nintendo was able to do with that console. And in order to understand what Nintendo did with Switch, first we have to understand what happened with Wii U. Now Wii U was a more colossal failure actually than Xbox One. So you're seeing Phil lament how bad Xbox One was, how bad it hurt them, how it's such an almost impossible task to overcome, specifically within hardware. Nintendo actually overcame one far, far, far more difficult to recover from than what Xbox would have to do with Xbox One. And that is Wii U, a console that lifetime, guys, sold 13.56 million units. We just saw PlayStation 5 ship more than that in 1 year. The PlayStation 5 shipped over 19 million units last year. In 1 year, they shipped more PlayStation 5s than Nintendo was able to sell lifetime of Wii U, okay? And that accounted for only 103.54 million units of software. Absolutely cataclysmically poor results we're talking here for the Wii U. We're talking cataclysmically poor in terms of hardware, and we're talking cataclysmically poor in software. For a direct comparison, Xbox One was significantly stronger than this in both hardware and software, okay? Now, what did Nintendo follow that up with? They had this absolute disaster of the Wii U. They followed that up with Nintendo Switch, a console, again, that launched only 3 years before the Xbox Series consoles did, that is now past 122.55 million units, and software is at 994.3 million units, approaching 1 billion units of software. Look at that comparison real quick, guys. 13.56 million units of hardware, 122.55 million units. 103.54 million units of software, going on 1 billion. And this just happened. This just took place. When in fact, it's still currently taking place. The Switch is still the current console on the market. This is not a console from 20 years ago. This is not a console from before the digital push, by the way, because you have Phil here talking about how it's all about the digital library of games and how they're in so much trouble because the digital library, guys, Switch came out after the digital push, and it had no digital library. And yet they still sold 122 million units of it, and it's not done. It's still going to sell millions and millions of units more, and that's with no one bringing a digital library with them. How did they do that, guys? I see it out there. I see the commentary. If you just build great games, everything will turn around. It's just not true. Why did Nintendo sell 122 million units of hardware, guys? Did they sell 122 million units of Nintendo Switch hardware because of the online? You tell me, guys. Did they sell 122 million units of hardware because the digital library that they carried with them? You tell me, guys. Or did they sell 122 million units of hardware and nearly a billion units of software because of Zelda Breath of the Wild? And because Animal Crossing? And because Pokemon? And because Mario Odyssey? You guys tell me. Do you guys think that they just did this just now? This is happening as we speak. This isn't something from the past. You guys tell me, did Nintendo sell that much hardware and software because the digital library that they carried over from Wii U and their amazing online infrastructure, or did they do that through games? You guys tell me. You guys tell me what happened there. Now, another thing that people may mention is they may say, Benji, Phil's going to factor in not just console, he's going to factor in handheld. He's going to be factoring 3DS into that. So really, is the Switch that much more successful? Because yeah, Wii U was a bomb, but look at the 3DS. Okay, let's look at the 3DS, guys. Much better than the Wii U. Right? Much, much better. Yeah, much, much better. Okay, now we're cooking with gas. Now we know what Phil means. Phil means 3DS and Wii U. Once you combine those two, you know, that's what it is. Well, guys, it still invalidates Phil's claims because Switch by itself has sold more hardware than the 3DS and Wii U combined, and it has sold more software than the 3DS and Wii U combined. And let's be honest, there was definitely overlap between the 3DS and Wii U in terms of hardware sales. Of course, if you're a Nintendo fan, obviously not everyone that owned a Wii U owned a 3DS because 3DS greatly outsold Wii U. So clearly it wasn't everyone. But do you guys think that a large chunk of those Wii U owners also owned 3DSs? I suspect so. So that still invalidates the claim that you can't just still right now, this is happening as we speak, not recover a console cycle. It just invalidates it, guys. It's just the truth. Nintendo completely proves these claims to just not be true. Now let's keep going because there's more that I want to go into here. Quote number 4. This idea, if we just focus on great games on our console, somehow we are going to win the console race, doesn't really lay into the reality of most people. Like 90% of the people every year who walk into a retailer to buy a console are already a member of the 3 ecosystems. Their digital library is there. This is the first generation where the big games they're playing were games that were available last gen. The continuity of generation to generation is so strong. Well, this is one where I'm actually uniquely prepared to respond to this because this is what I do. This is what I've done for the last more than 15 years of my life, and that is to sell consoles to consumers. I worked many, many years at GameStop in management chain there, dealing with guests and customers every single day, selling consoles to them in games. And that is actually what I still currently do at a different retailer. I sell consoles to people every single day. Now, there is some truth to what Phil's saying, and there's also some things I disagree with. So first of all, is he correct that 90% of the people every year who walk in to buy a console are already a member of the 3 ecosystems? Absolutely, I'd say actually. Phil, you are correct. Most people that are coming in to buy a console, they already at some point have had a console, right? Whether that is Nintendo, whether that is PlayStation, whether that is Xbox. You do not have many people that are coming in that have never owned a console. Phil is 100% correct on that, so that is a win for Phil here. However, isn't that why Series S exists? Isn't that why you built a low-price console, entry level into the market? Is not the purpose of a Series S to get in people like the exact people that Phil is talking about? A low-priced companion console that they can sell to people who own Nintendo or PlayStation ecosystems? Is this not the perfectly positioned device for someone that is playing on their PlayStation and yet sees huge games like Starfield, like Fable, like Avowed start hitting and be like, huh, I want to experience that. And wait, you have a low cost entry level console where I can come into your ecosystem? Is that not the purpose of why you built Series S? So yes, it is absolutely true, Phil, that most people are already part of an ecosystem. However, Phil is still building this narrative right now that it's really like win or bust. That it's like we have to just outsell PlayStation or Nintendo, or else hardware is almost seen as a failure, right? You're seeing very strong wording here from Phil. He keeps building up how they're just the small dog here, how they're in so much trouble, how they just cannot surmount or overcome anyone. And it's like, you don't have to do that and still be highly successful in hardware. And it keeps coming back to the games, and we're going to go into the games here in just a second, because this next quote is quite possibly the most explosive of the entire segment, and that is this. I see a lot of pundits out there that kind of want to go back to the time we all had cartridges and discs, and every time a new generation was a clean slate. Well, I'm not 100% sure which pundits he's talking about. There very well may be ones of those, but to me, this specific quote seems a little bit dodging to me. It feels a little bit like dodging, but okay, let's just say there are people that are saying that. And you could switch the whole console share. That's just not the world we are in today. There's no world where Starfield is an 11 out of 10 and people start selling their PS5s. That's not going to happen. Now, this is potentially the most explosive quote. And I also believe out of everything that I've broken down here that I kind of disagree with, this may be the worst. And that's because of this. I believe Phil's building a case here that no one's saying. And if there are people saying this, maybe it's just kind of random Twitter console warriors, but I believe no one serious is saying that Starfield, if it's an 11 out of 10, is going to make someone sell their PS5s. Phil, that shouldn't be the goal. That shouldn't even be the discussion point right now. What it should be is that Starfield's so attractive that those people that own PS5s, they don't sell them. They don't abandon their PS5s. Because you're right, Phil, that's probably never going to happen. Those games should be so attractive that you're pulling them into your ecosystem despite them owning a PlayStation 5. Despite them owning a Nintendo Switch. Those big first-party games, those juggernauts, those Starfields, those Avoweds, if you consistently start getting 11 out of 10, and I'm only saying 11 out of 10 because that's the specific wording Phil uses. If you can consistently, Phil, we're talking if you can get 3 or 4 of these types of games per year, you are correct that people aren't going to just abandon PlayStation. But you know what you will do? You will get some, not everyone, you will get some people that already own PlayStations or Nintendo. That 200 plus million install base between the two of them. Between PlayStation and Nintendo, we're talking more than 200 million console install base. That you get some of them to want to play these games so badly that they come to your ecosystem. They buy that Series S. They buy that Series X. They get invested into your ecosystem. It makes them sign up for Game Pass. It makes them get an Xbox to also have these sorts of experiences that they can't get on a PlayStation or that they can't get on a Nintendo. That's the whole point of big flagship console exclusives. Guys, what did we just talk about here? How did Nintendo sell 122 million units of hardware, the platform with the worst third-party support from AAA publishers? How did that happen? How did they sell that 122 million units? It wasn't because Grand Theft Auto. It wasn't because EA Sports games, which I know they get, but they get much, much inferior versions. It wasn't because Battlefield. It wasn't because Call of Duty. How did Nintendo sell 122 million units of Switch? They sold them from games like Starfield. They sold them from Animal Crossings. They sold them from Zeldas. They sold them from Marios. That is the purpose of these 11 out of 10 Starfield type experiences. It's to give people games of such a high quality bar that they can't ignore them. That even if they already have a PlayStation or Nintendo, they must find a way to play them. And I'm completely all for Microsoft expanding how people play those games. I think cloud's completely fine. I think PC is completely fine. In fact, I think it's better than fine. I think it's great. I think you're going to be able to build Xbox into a truly enormous ecosystem if you continue down this path. What I don't like about these quotes from Phil is that he's painting the console, specifically the Xbox consoles, as almost inferior products that are going to struggle and can't compete. A lot of this phrasing essentially boils down to we can't compete. Phil, you can compete. You have to have a little more self-belief. You know what I mean? And I'm trying to be nice here. I respect Phil so much. I feel like what we're seeing come out here, what I feel like we're seeing Phil kind of vent, that's the way I'll phrase it. What I feel like is what's happening is Phil is venting. And I feel like he kind of feels inside like it is incredibly hard to compete. And that's because it absolutely is. These are not easy answers. These are not, Microsoft can just come out tomorrow and sell 100 million Xbox Series consoles, because it is a challenge. But these games like Starfield, these games like Avowed, these consistent hitters, maybe you can't outsell PlayStation 5. Because you know what? I think Phil is actually pretty fair on that. I think that Xbox at its peak and PlayStation at its peak, 10 times out of 10 almost worldwide, I'm going to pick PlayStation in that fight in terms of total install base. But here's the thing. It's not just about beating PlayStation. It's about, can you get those Xbox Series consoles from selling 50 million units to 90 million units? Because that's a huge difference on your financials. That's 40 million potentially more people that you can get signing up to Game Pass. That's 40 million more potential people you can get to buy first-party games on Xbox. That's 40 million people potentially that you can get buying into DLC for these sorts of games and joining your ecosystem. It's a giant important thing. And I think trying to frame things like Starfield just isn't going to be able to have an impact. Phil, it can. You have to believe more. I feel like Naruto, right? Isn't that what they say? You gotta believe, or that's off something. So, guys, that's my kind of thoughts on this. I hope that this rant is not met negatively. I hope you guys all understand where I'm coming from here. Again, I really respect Phil. I think that deep down, Phil believes a lot of what I'm saying here as well. I think that this was just the tail end of an interview that was already very hard, because it was a hard interview. If you guys go back and watch it, Kind of Funny didn't let Phil off the hook. It was tough questions. It was tough responses. And I feel like at the end of a tough interview, Phil's just kind of coming in here and feeling a little bit discouraged. And we're seeing that come through in some of his statements. So don't take these too hard, but I did have to address some of them because I felt that some of it just isn't based in reality. And I kind of wanted to put it out there for some Xbox fans, because I'm seeing a lot of Xbox fans very upset about what Phil's saying, especially like hear about Starfield and feeling like discouraged about the state of the Xbox consoles. I would tell you guys, don't be discouraged, and Xbox can still come back, guys. They absolutely can. I know Phil's painting a pretty starkly negative picture here on Xbox hardware sales. He really is. That's just the truth, guys. I provided you direct quotes. He's painting it as an insurmountable task. It's not insurmountable. They could have Xbox Series consoles be the best-selling Xbox consoles ever, but that is going to take a lot of work. And I hope you guys enjoyed it. I've never done a response video like this. I hope it goes over well, guys. And if not, I apologize. But I just had to. When I heard that segment of the interview, all about sales and all about this, I was like, I can't. I can't sit aside and not address some of this. So I had to talk about it. Thanks so much, guys. I hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, like this video. Consider subscribing to the channel for more of this content and follow me on Twitter. I'm Benji Sales. As always, everyone, stay safe, play some games, and I'll see you all next time.